Hello friends, welcome back. Today is unusually cold here for South Florida. It is 57 degrees out and it's really nice out. Blue skies. We haven't had blue skies in a while, and so it's interesting how when the skies are blue, my blues go away and I tend to feel a little bit happier, a little bit more optimistic, and it's just easier to be in a good mood, which doesn't mean that one can't be in a good mood if it's rainy or gloomy or snowy or volatile weather, but it is just naturally easier when it's blue skies and no clouds. That being said, the story I want to share today is a tough one to share. And I don't know that I've had the courage to share it, or I don't know if courage is the right way to describe sharing this story, but I'm going to change I'm going to protect everyone's anonymity involved. But I do want to share the story because it involves some really heavy things. It involves cancer. It involves betrayal. It involves lots of things that people probably don't want to talk about and yet deal with on a regular basis. And thankfully, the police don't have anything to do with what I'm going to talk about today. But let's just get right into it and I'll share the story. So I've learned as life progresses, some of the friends that I've made as I've been growing up don't typically grow with me. And I'm a very loyal person. I'm a very loyal friend. I want to stay friends with many people in my life, but that's just not the way life works out sometimes. So it is unusual to have lifelong friends, but I've been blessed to have many. And I've had some exceptional friends, and some of them have lasted almost my entire life, which is a phenomenal blessing, and I'm very happy about that. But I guess long way of getting to, it was not uncommon for me to, as I was younger, be some of my friends' best man, or be their best man in their wedding, to be their kids' godfather. I have been honored to do lots of those things. And the seasons of life change. And so many of the friends that I had as a young adult, I drifted away from. And again, I don't think any of this is uncommon. I think it's just the natural progression of life. But as I've grown up and matured and changed and evolved, some of the folks that I was very close to, that I felt like were brothers or sisters in my life, they just didn't, they haven't managed to stay along for the journey. And there have been many reasons for those disconnections in our relationships. And, sometimes it's just life gets busy, you have kids, seasons change, jobs change, circumstances change, geographic location may change, but every once in a while, sometimes people get stuck, myself included, in very toxic behavioral patterns. And if I'm being totally honest, there was a season of my life where, before I was a father, I was wild, I was reckless, and especially when I was in my teens and early 20s, I was a maniac, and I lived a fast, wild, crazy lifestyle. And thank God I grew out of that. But the reality of it is, I stayed in that season, and I stayed stuck in that position for way longer than I ever should have. But that is my story. That is my journey. And a lot of it had to do with my drinking. And if you watch some of my videos, you may have seen that I worked in the financial services industry, worked with the Wolf of Wall Street type environments, and it was a tremendous amount of fun when I was young. But we were living fast, we were living loose, we were not particularly good people. We were really selfish, and I don't want to say we, I'll just use me. I was very selfish, and the only thing I cared about was whatever the next thing I wanted was. And I became hyper-focused on that. So I was the big man around town, and I was the one paying for all the bills, and I was the one going to all the places. But we lived so fast cars, fast women, fast lifestyle, fast money, you name it, I did it all. And I got to a point, unfortunately slower than it should have been, but I got to a point where I didn't like living that way anymore. And yet I felt trapped. I felt stuck. I felt like, one of the terms I've heard people use is I was trapped by golden handcuffs, because I was so good at what I did that earning money wasn't really very difficult for me. I got to a point where it was kind of like on autopilot. I don't think the wind is going to be conducive to good recording, so I'm not going to walk that way. But I did want to be outside to tell this relatively dark story. I think I see a spot up here which will work. I'm at a park, got some tennis courts, got a lake, got a playground, got a not so nice basketball hoop, but it's good enough. But I think it'll be quiet and allow me to tell my story. Anyhow, that's the background, right? So I was living wild, I was living fast, and although I had an internal moral compass, and I was raised to have a conscience, it was easier when I was younger to ignore it and rationalize and justify bad behavior. And although there was certainly a internal battle that I was probably fighting with myself, I was truthfully, it was okay. And honestly, I didn't have the courage to make the moves that I needed to live a different lifestyle up until I became a father. And so, very long background to get to where I wanted to go, but I was one of the last of my friends to have children. I was one of the last of my friends to get married. And I was one of the last of my friends to really grow up and become an adult. And what does that even mean, right? Because in many ways, I want to keep my childlike curiousness, imagination, playfulness. There are many benefits to a youthful lifestyle, but that's not what this was. This was me. In fact, at one point I said, at the time, a middle-aged man with unlimited discretionary income and no moral compass is maybe one of the most dangerous types of people out there, because I was just a pleasure-seeking missile in many ways, and I could delude myself into thinking that it was, or I could rationalize myself into thinking it was okay, but internally there was a big discrepancy between how I wanted to live and how I was actually living, which takes me to the story that I wanted to tell. And hoping this wind, I might have to change my position, because I know if the audio's no good, ain't nobody listening. But long way getting to. When I became a father, I always knew internally that I would be a good father. I always knew I had it in me to be a great father. And being a great father was extremely important to me. But when I got the news, I did not change my behavior. I was still pretty wild. But as we got closer to my daughter being born, I knew that I needed to completely change my life. I needed to rebrand my life. I knew I had to become the person that I knew I was capable of being, but I was not being. But I made a decision, and I made a decision I would change. I stopped drinking completely, and the analogy that I like to use, and I used in the past, is that I overnight made a decision that I would stop being Charles Manson and I would start being Mr. Rogers. And that's what I did. And so it should be noted that just because I decided that I wanted to make a change did not mean that the people that were in my life were going to accept that change or were going to believe that change. There wasn't a whole lot of trust, and my track record was terrible. So although I may have said that I was turning over a new leaf and starting anew, there weren't a whole lot of people that necessarily believed that that was actually what was going to happen. But I knew it was going to happen. And so I did whatever I needed to do to make those changes. And I won't go into the long list of what those things are. That might be a separate video. But what I can say for certain with my hand to God is that I made that decision and I made those changes, and my life changed radically from the actions that I took every single day, every single minute, every single second from that moment forward. And I grew, I evolved, and I became the man that I wanted to be. Which takes me to my story, because some of my friends did not do that. And one of my best friends, and I think it's ridiculous to use the term best friends when you're an adult, because I've had so many best friends. I've had so many people, so many mentors, so many friends, so many brothers, so many critical people in my life that have helped me become the person that I am today. But one of my oldest friends, my college roommate, was arguably the person that I felt was the most like me in my life. I saw so much potential in my friend, and he was dynamic, he was hilarious, he was one of the best personalities, one of the best people you would ever meet, so much fun. But similar to me, he had many of those same problems. And when he called me to let me know that he was becoming a father, and I was the best man in his wedding, I was very close with him and his family. I've known, for decades. But when I heard that news, I was about as excited as I could possibly have been for anybody, because I believed that he would make the decisions that I made. And I looked so forward to what the future would be like for us raising our children, and what it would be like to share the dad experience with him. I'm very close with his with all of his family, with his wife, with his in-laws, with everybody. Like, I was so excited, and I knew that if I could do it, if I could make these changes, that he could too. And I expected him to do those things. I believed he would make the same changes that I made, and I prayed to God that he would make those changes, but he didn't. And I know that change doesn't happen overnight. And I know how hard of a struggle it is to eliminate the people, places, and things in one's life that don't serve them, because I did it myself. And it's hard. It's simple, but it isn't easy. And yet I knew that if I made that decision, he could make that decision. And I was so excited for the future for him. But as the years progressed, and look, anybody who has a child, any parents who have children, go through an enormous evolution. And it's hard. I do not want to make it sound like it's easy. And while I do think some people are better than others with kids, I do think that some people have an intuitive gift. And I think I'm one of them. Not everybody has that. So I know that even the best parents in the world still struggle. There are times where I'm frustrated and not at my best being a parent, but it's par for the course. It's normal. It's hard. So I had a lot of patience. I had a lot of empathy, but I also had a lot of expectation that he would do the things that I had done. And over the years, what I unfortunately came to realize is that none of the changes, none of the decisions, none of the actions that I took were matching the changes that I wanted him to take. And we were not as close. We drifted apart quickly. And the final straw for me was when I went to visit him. He lives in a different state, or lived in a different state. I went to visit him, and I was so excited to see him, his children, his wife, his everything. And he knew I was coming, so this was not an unplanned visit. But when I got there early in the morning extremely excited to experience what his new reality was, what I found is that when I got there, he had already started drinking. And it was early in the day. Maybe it was 9 o'clock, maybe it was 10 o'clock, I don't know. And I'm not here to judge anybody's decisions or what they do or what they don't do, but I was extremely disappointed because here I am, up from, I traveled several hundred miles to spend some time with him. And when I got there, he was drunk or well on his way to it. And the way I saw him parent in his drunkenness was certainly not anything that I could relate to, and it made me extremely sad. And while he was certainly not violent or abusive or any of those really bad things, he was drunk. And he did not have the bandwidth or the mental clarity to take care of his kid the right way. And again, I'm not here to judge it, but I know that when somebody's drunk, they're not paying attention to their kid the right way. It's one of the reasons why I made the decision I would never do that. And I have never done that. And I never will. I never want my kids to see me anything other than fully present and fully in control. I want them to be able to trust that I am the best version of myself, and I am so grateful that that is all they have ever seen. But I also know I'm just one bad choice away from opening up the gates of hell, and the gates of hell is exactly what I saw when I was visiting my friend. Now, I'm not going to belabor the point, but some of the choices that played out throughout the course of the day that I was asked to keep secret, like his drinking, and then like his drinking and driving with the child in the car, made me sick. And so I didn't allow those things to happen. I also did not keep the secret. And at the end of our brief morning, I told him, and I'll keep his name out of it, but I told him to his face, I will not keep any of this secret. I have a responsibility to ensure that the mother of your children know what's happening because they are in danger. And I know you may be mad at me, but this is what a real friend will do, and this is what I have to do because I'm your friend and I love you. But I also knew there was no version of me that could live with myself if I did not share the truth. I could not live with myself if, God forbid, and it's not even God forbid, I knew that the alcoholism that he was suffering from would inevitably end in a bad place. And I knew it would inevitably put his children at risk, and I could not live with that on my conscience. And so I told him what I intended to do. I then told the truth to everybody who needed to hear it. And from that point on, I made it clear that I was not interested in speaking to him again until he was interested in having a conversation with me about what the solution for his alcohol problem was. And if he ever called me with that, then I would be more than happy to talk to him. But anything short of that, I just simply was done. I could not continue to be his friend. I could not continue to enable him, support him, or pretend that anything he was doing was okay, because that was not my experience. And there was some brief, hell to pay for me. I got lots of nasty phone calls, lots of nasty accusations, lots of acting out that was to be expected, and not anything I was unfamiliar with. I knew what was going to happen, but many years passed before we ever spoke again. And I was fine with that. And we lost connection. We lost our friendship. We lost our relationship. And I was perfectly okay with that, because I would not encourage or enable him any further. And what I learned about myself is that I am not capable of being friends, really friends, with someone who I do not admire or respect as a father. And that's just my journey. That's part of my evolution. I do not choose to be friends, real friends, really connected with folks that I do not respect as parents. And that's my decision. So many years passed, in fact, a decade or more passed, and I hadn't heard from him in years and didn't think I ever would. But out of the blue, one day I received a phone call from my friend, and I answered the call. And I was devastated by what he shared. And he was a mess. He sounded sober, or at least sober enough, but the message he communicated to me was that he was dying of cancer. And you might imagine, and I don't know how anybody else would deal with this information, but immediately I forgave him. Immediately I had tremendous empathy. Immediately I made a decision that I would be there for him. And I listened to him for several hours, bare his soul, his regrets, his fears, his admiration of the changes that I made that he was incapable of making. And it was horribly sad. It was horribly draining. It was horribly painful. But my heart broke for him and his family. And I am a very loyal person. I made a decision in that moment that I would do whatever I could do to help support him in his journey to the other side. And it never once occurred to me to question what he was saying, because I can't imagine a world where anybody would lie to me about having terminal cancer. And the things that he shared lined up with his experiences, the things he was going through, lined up with, he seemed to be dying of terminal cancer. But it wasn't going to be tomorrow. It was going to be a journey. And he did have time. And so at the end, who knows how much time? Nobody knows how much time they have ever. But I made that decision. I would be there for my friend. And when he had finished, and this was a very heavy phone call, but at the end of the conversation, and I listened to his regrets, and I listened to his fears, and I listened to everything he had to say, and I intently listened. I said to him, I asked permission. Do you want me to tell you what you want to hear, or do you want me to tell you the truth? And he said, tell me the truth. I said, as horrible as everything you just said is, and I took him at face value, the good news is you have right now. So from this moment forward, you can make the decision to do all of the things that you just told me you didn't get a chance to do. You can lean in more. You can love more. You can forgive more. You can be present more. You can do a million different things differently to ensure whatever time you have left is the best time that you've ever had with your children, with your family, with your life. And I'll be there with you throughout that journey. I will not abandon you. I'm your friend. And that was the end of that conversation. And I prayed to God that he would make those decisions. But instead, what I got was months, and I don't think it was quite a year, but I got many more phone calls and many more pleas for mercy and pleas for me to step up and be the father to his kids, and for me to be responsible, and for me to agree to do all the things that he should be doing and should have done now and in the future when he's not here. And I also told him the truth. I said to him, I can't do that. I would love to be able to do that, but I'd be lying to you if I told you that I could do that. I can't. I have my own kids. I have my own family. I have my own life. But I won't abandon anybody. I will do the best I can, and I will make sure they know who you are the right way and live your life to the fullest right now. Get sober, get the help. And again, when somebody's dying of cancer, I don't know what their pain levels are. I don't know what's appropriate for them to take or not take. I don't know. And I also don't have any, my sobriety is one thing, but if you're in enormous pain and dying of cancer, well then, if you need medicine for pain, take the medicine. I'm not against that. I don't know what the rules are, but I do know if you need the help, take the help. But don't abuse it, and certainly don't self-medicate, and certainly don't continue drinking. I don't know what the right path for anybody is, but I do know drinking 2 gallons of vodka a day, whether you're dying of cancer or not, is not the right choice if you're trying to be present and the best parent that you could be. But that was the choice that he chose to make. And so while I did commit to being there for him for as long as I could, it eventually became very clear that the terminal cancer that he has isn't stopping him from drinking aggressively. It hasn't slowed down his alcoholism. It's accelerated his alcoholism. And when it finally became clear to me that that's what was happening, I then had to also let him know I could no longer subject myself to the torture that he was presenting to me. I could not co-sign his bullshit. I could not be around for the ride. I would love to put the oxygen mask on him, but I had to put it on myself first. And these calls were getting more and more insane, more and more crazy, more and more painful. And I got to a point where I had to be my own friend and put myself and my family first. And so, but I told him, and I said, Chris, I can no longer talk to you until the next conference. Don't ever call me drunk again. If you want to call me when you're sober, then I'll be happy to talk to you. Well, I never got another phone call from him sober. And that was sad. It was extremely sad. And I mourned the loss of my friend while he was still alive. And it was a deep loss. I, at one point, remember I took myself on a pilgrimage, if you will. I found a remote camp here in Florida that's isolated. It's on a river, and there's nobody there. It's like a little log cabin, and I went there to get some peace and pray and meditate and come to terms with the fact that my friend was going to die, because although there had been decades of disconnection, this was still somebody that I loved and I considered a brother, and it hurt me immeasurably that this is where he was at. But I went there to make peace and find peace. And while I was there, out of the blue, and it's funny because the place that I was at did not get cell phone reception. I intentionally found a place where it's not connected. I didn't want to get work phone calls. I didn't want to get any phone calls. I just wanted to commune with nature and God and quiet. But as I was there and I was sitting on a dock and I thought I was disconnected from nature, the phone rang. And the phone, which should not have rang, it rang. I picked it up, and it wasn't him, but it was his ex-wife. And I was surprised to hear from her. I was surprised to hear from anybody, but she let me know that my friend was on his deathbed and he'd like to hear from me. And I said, well, that's great. If he'd like to hear from me, well, then he can call me. And she said, well, he's not going to call you. I said, okay, well then let him, that's unfortunate, but I've already mourned his loss and I don't want to talk to him, but if he wants to talk to me, I'm happy to talk to him. And that may sound cold. I don't know how it sounds, but that's where I landed. And that phone call never came. But throughout the rest of the conversation with his ex-wife, she then let me know the most shocking thing that I did not know. She assumed that I knew, but it turned out that my friend had been lying the whole time about having cancer. He did not have cancer. And that was devastating. That betrayal was heartbreaking. It was, I just sat there on that dock, dumbfounded, at a loss for words. I could not believe that I had been lied to for the last year and made myself available for his passing and for him and forgave him and did all these different things. I could not believe that I fell for the lie and was victimized by the lie. And I was mad. I was furious. And I didn't understand, because had my friend just told me the truth about what he was actually suffering from at that point, which was liver failure, I probably would have done all the same things. I probably would have made the same decisions. I probably would have been there for him the same way. But to have been lied to about it and to have been manipulated about it just tore me apart. And I was furious. I got over it. I found peace and I forgave him. But he passed, and I did never see him, and I did never speak to him. And the moral of the story is, I guess, and the reason I'm sharing it, is that alcoholism is such a cunning, baffling, terminal disease. And I didn't realize that my friend was so far gone into his disease of alcoholism that the person that I was talking to, the person that I remembered, the person that I considered a brother, the person that I loved, had already been dead for decades. I was speaking to someone who was so far gone in their own disease that I didn't know the person that I was talking to. And so it took me a while to get there, but I forgave him. And I didn't regret, and I don't regret not having spoken to him in the end. I made my peace with him and God, and I pray for him and his family, and I still talk to his family and his children, and I love them and always will. But I do hate alcoholism. And yet I look at this story as an opportunity for me to see what the other road may have looked like for me had I not chosen to live a different way when I had the opportunity to grow, and when I had the opportunity, the gift and the miracle of becoming a father. So I certainly don't regret the decisions that I've made to eliminate alcohol from my life. But I do know that for people who are real alcoholics, it only ends one of three ways: jails, institutions, and death. And the sad part is, I don't know, it's irrelevant to me what anybody believes in terms of God or heaven or hell or any of those things. Everybody has their own belief system. But what I do know is my friend suffered through a life of hell of his own choosing that only escalated and got worse and worse and worse until he died alone in a place that must have felt like hell. And I'm so grateful that that will not be my experience. And I felt like I wanted to share this story, and it's funny. I don't have the cup in front of me. The whole reason that this story even came to the forefront of my mind was that I had gone to Bennigan's here this past week. And while I was at Bennigan's and I got the big green cups and sat in the familiar Bennigan circumstance. Was it Bennigan's? Am I saying the right place? I gotta check. Let me check here. I gotta fact check myself. It's not Bennigan's. I knew I should look this up. It's not Bennigan's. I think Bennigan's is out of business. It's Flanagan's. Flanagan's. I went to Flanagan's, and I hadn't been to Flanagan's probably since the last time I went there with him. But my children asked me, they said, "Daddy, can we go to Flanagan's?" I guess they had gone with somebody else. And or one of my, they were on a play date with some of our other friends, and they ate at Flanagan's. But while we were at Flanagan's, and this is their child's cup, I got the big one, which I remember. I used to love those big green cups. Now I fill them with coffee, but it triggered all these different memories, and they were fun and happy memories of when we could drink carefree, but it reminded me so much of my friend. And so I felt like I wanted to share this video, and just know just know I hate alcoholism. I truly do. And if it's something that you or anyone you know is suffering from, please know there is a solution, and please know that there is a path out of that hell. And although it is not easy, it's not hard. Make a decision, stop drinking, period. Repeat, forever. And your life and everyone's life around you who loves you will improve exponentially. But it takes time, and that's my story. So if nobody's told you today that they love you, just know that I do, and I'll catch you on my next video.